Hey guys, Jazz here, back with another video, and today we're going to be doing something a little different from what I normally do, but something that I really enjoy, and hopefully I'll be able to put more of these into actual videos for you guys, and that is a ranking of TV show episodes, specifically the Clone Wars Season 7. I am a big fan of the Clone Wars, and I have been for probably as long as I've been a Star Wars fan. As you can see, I've got all the seasons lined up here, so it's been a long time. I was right around the right age for when the first few seasons started coming out. I was very young, so the animated style caught my eye, and as I've gotten older, I've grown even more of an appreciation for the show, and for how it can be good to introduce children to Star Wars, but it's still very appropriate for adults to watch it, with some very adult sequences like the Umbara arc, which is a very not-for-kids storyline. So how this is going to work is I'll start with my ranking of all 12 episodes, and then I'll move on to an overall review of the season. Starting with my least favorite at the number 12 spot is Episode 7, A Dangerous Debt. So this is the third episode of the infamous Trace and Rafa arc, which was just not the best. It's a complete waste of an arc, in my opinion, of 4 episodes that could have been done in just 2 or even 1. So episode 3 is definitely at the bottom because I felt like this was the most useless of all 4 episodes of the arc, because basically they start in jail and they end in jail. Everything in between is just the two sisters messing up and Ahsoka having to get them out of situations that they got themselves into, which is a fun idea, but just both characters were so annoying, and it just got old after episodes 1 and 2. Moving up to spot 11 is episode 5, Gone with a Trace. This was the first episode of the Trace and Rafa arc, which was a fun little adventure to get Ahsoka introduced back into the Clone Wars, but I really felt like that arc could have just stopped there. And I put this one at number 11 because it's completely useless to the actual story of the overall season, which wouldn't be terrible if this wasn't the last season and it wasn't only 12 episodes. When you have a 12-episode season, I personally just feel like you shouldn't have complete side filler episodes that have nothing to do with the overall story of this season. Moving up into the top 10 is episode 6, Deal or No Deal. This is the second episode of the Trace and Rafa arc. I hope you're noticing a pattern here. This episode, I actually liked this episode because I feel like this one got the most done. We had this whole mission with the spice. We went to a bunch of different places. We got to see the Pikes a little bit, which kind of got us interested in maybe seeing Maul in the future episodes. So this one is definitely towards the top of my ranking for this specific arc of Trace and Rafa. When Ahsoka uses the Force to trick the Pikes with the Jedi mind trick, it was a very nice little reminiscence of how I'm pretty sure she failed to do that a number of times earlier on in the series, and now to see her able to do this and much more strong in the Force and confident in her abilities was very, very cool. At my number 9 spot, I have episode 8, Together Again. This one is the 4th episode of the Trace and Rafa arc, so yes, I do have the entire Trace and Rafa arc as the bottom 4 spots on my list, but that's just, as I said before, it felt like a waste of a 4-episode arc that could have just been done in 2. However, if I were to mesh these 4 episodes into 2, I would probably keep episode 4 the same, because I feel, and then just mix episodes 1, 2, and 3 together. Maybe even cut out episode 3 entirely. But I feel like in episode 4, Trace and Rafa were at their most competent, their least annoying for me. They actually got some things done without the help of Ahsoka, which was always cool to see. And Ahsoka, all by herself, took down that entire pipe factory, which was pretty awesome. And we also got our first glimpse of Darth Maul, really giving us a look into the future, and seeing that this arc did actually have a purpose in the overall story for the season. At the end, we see Lady Bo-Katan come to recruit Ahsoka, and we know that it's about to get good. Number 8 on my list is Episode 3, On the Wings of the Keerdals. This episode was the 3rd episode of the Bad Batch arc, which, to me, this arc was really enjoyable. It wasn't really directly tied to the probably the most important storyline of this season, which is being able to tie us into Revenge of the Sith. But it did offer some nods, like the Anakin and Padme scene and the Dark Side Anakin scene. Now, right now, not to talk about the entire arc, but specifically Episode 3 and why it is my least favorite episode of this arc. And that is because it's the shortest episode of the entire season, actually, and it really felt short. Which, to me, I like my Clone Wars episodes to feel long, to feel like a movie, which some of the later episodes really do, and this episode just did not do that for me. The action moved very quickly. There wasn't a whole lot of actual plot to it. It was mainly just the action at the beginning, bringing Echo out of the Techno-Union base, and then at the end when the Techno-Union are invading their Poltec village, and it was just action the whole way through, which I loved the action, but it just made the episode feel very short. And as I've said before, in a 12-episode season, not only is there no time to waste, but I also want to feel like I got the most out of the time that I had. Now that I've talked about the negatives of the episode, I'm going to move on to some of the things that I really liked, which was, of course, the interactions and the banter between all the members of the Bad Batch and the Regs, Captain Rex, Jesse, and Echo. And with Anakin being more heavily involved with this one, it was good to see some more Jedi action again, including when he takes down that big droid, I forget what it's called, but he's like flipping around it and cutting off the cannons and slicing it apart. It was just, the action, as I said, was so much fun. It's just too bad that it moved way too quickly for me. The next episode on my list, at spot number 7, is Episode 4, Unfinished Business. This episode, I really loved this episode because it showed a whole lot of more Jedi involvement with Mace Windu, Obi-Wan, and Anakin, and seeing them team up with the Bad Batch and teaming up with Echo, who is back and in action, was a lot of fun and felt a lot like the Clone Wars of old. This whole Bad Batch arc really just feels like some good Clone Wars fun, even though it's not directly tied to Revenge of the Sith. This arc, I'd say, is certainly the most fun episode of the season, with just people blowing stuff up and clone troopers going around, just having a good time, shooting some clankers. So, seeing especially the different ways that the Bad Batch uses their abilities, like Wrecker smashing through the droids, and Crosshairs with his scene where he sets up those, I don't know, those little reflector circle things, and then he just shoots one blast and is able to bounce it off the walls and take out an entire hallway of droids. It was just so much fun, and with the inclusion of a little bit of Anakin's dark side when he kills Admiral Trench and blows up the ship. Coming into the top half of my list is Episode 1, The Bad Batch. The very first episode of the Bad Batch arc, and the very first episode of Clone Wars Season 7 was absolutely just amazing. With, like, the people we're familiar with, like Anakin and Rex and Obi-Wan, and then introducing us to fun, quirky characters like the Clone Wars always has, with every member of the Bad Batch. Each member of the Bad Batch is unique, and I didn't find myself really liking any one more than the other because they were just all so good, and they all have their moments with Wrecker lifting the gunship, which was my favorite part of this episode, when he just lifts the gunship off of Cody to rescue him. The music at that scene and the lighting was just absolutely beautiful. And Hunter doing all of his, like, Rambo type stuff. I've seen people call him the Rambo clone. And then Crosshairs, always trying to pick a fight with the Regs, like Captain Rex or Jesse. This episode was just the perfect start to the season, the perfect start to this arc, showing us some of the Clone Wars that we all know and love. If you've been noticing the trend, I'm pretty sure you can guess that the number 5 spot on my list goes to Episode 2, A Distant Echo, the second episode of the Bad Batch arc. This one was, obviously, it's my favorite of the arc, and I just thought that it had the perfect blend of good, rich plot and character development, and just absolutely stunning action. So, when it comes to the plot, this one has the most in-your-face reference to Revenge of the Sith, and that is replacing the Padme nose art scene, which you all know what I'm talking about if you've seen the unfinished version from 7 years ago, replacing that scene with the scene of Anakin and Padme talking inside the troop barracks. So this, Padme, to all us viewers, was obviously pregnant, which shows us that we're really close to Revenge of the Sith. But Anakin obviously didn't notice. My favorite part of this episode was definitely when Obi-Wan called Anakin out, saying, "I hope you told Padme I said hello." So that he sort of knows, like, he's onto them. And especially Rex knowing, like, Anakin trusting Rex with the information that maybe not fully that him and Padme are married, but, you know, Rex knows that there's something going on. Now to talk about the action of the episode. The animation has just been completely stunning. The lighting and everything is on par with, pretty much on par or ahead of any animated movie these days. This is, of course, the episode where Anakin helps the Bad Batch and Rex break into the Techno-Union facility to rescue Echo. The whole infiltration scene with, trying to be stealthy, and then just, there's a ton of droids right there, was hilarious, and then jumped right into one of the coolest action sequences of the season. I am a big fan of how whenever there's a Bad Batch scene of the Bad Batch members taking out an entire room of droids, it's almost only ever 1, 2, 3 shots panning throughout the room. I think there was one part that was a whole battle scene that was done in just one shot. Might not have been this episode, but that just goes to show that the action is very good and very engaging. Oh, and one more thing. Bringing Echo back was a great move. He was my favorite member of the Domino Squad until he, died. And then Fives died, and now Echo's back. And all I can say is I would hate to have to be the guy to tell him that Fives is dead. The next episode on my list, at spot number 4, is Episode 9, Old Friends Not Forgotten. This episode was truly groundbreaking. I had heard shaky things regarding the Trace and Rafa arc, but once this episode hit, it was just like a shockwave had struck the community, and everyone was just so stoked for what was to come. This episode was, I didn't think it could get any better from here, but obviously it's my 4th favorite of a 4-episode arc, so clearly it goes up from here, but it couldn't possibly be by much. This episode, the action at the beginning sequence was certainly my favorite part, with that shot from Obi-Wan when he cuts apart the missile, I think, that was flying towards Cody, and then the camera pans from his lightsaber hilt up to his face. That was my favorite shot from the trailer, and I had been waiting for that scene for so long. It was just perfect. And as we go through, the interactions between Anakin and Ahsoka was very good, and I was a little bit disappointed that he didn't call her Snips when she said, "Hey Anakin, good luck." I feel like he should have said, "You two snips," or something, just to give a nod to their past relationship. Thinking about the Ahsoka and Obi-Wan interactions in that episode, they were very cold towards each other, which I was a little disappointed at when I was watching, but afterwards I realized that it fit their characters very well, since Obi-Wan is a much more devoted supporter of the Council and the Jedi than Anakin is. It would make sense that with Ahsoka leaving, he would be a little bit more offended by that than Anakin would be. So I think that all of the character choices and interactions was spot on in that episode, and the action was just perfect with the beginning sequence and at the very end with the Siege of Mandalore and Ahsoka just jumping down between gunships, slicing apart Mandalorians. It made me feel sort of proud of her, I just binge watched the Clone Wars, the entire series before this season came out, and being able to see her from that movie 12 years ago when she was very young and very immature and growing up to be this very, very powerful Padawan, but who probably should be a knight at this point if she had stayed with the Order. At the number 3 spot in this list is Episode 12, Victory and Death. Not only the season finale, but the Clone Wars series finale. Now, while I did like the 2 episodes prior a little bit better than this episode, I do feel like this was the perfect ending to the series. Specifically the last 3 minutes, of course, if you guys have seen it, you know Vader comes in, and I wasn't really expecting it, but now that I've seen it, I couldn't think of a way that they could have satisfyingly ended the Clone Wars without showing Vader at the end. This whole series has been about the building up of Anakin, making him a better character, just so that it would hurt more when we watched Revenge of the Sith and saw his fall to darkness. So having Vader in was just a perfect addition. The final shot especially was absolutely beautiful. I will admit I shed a couple of tears during this episode. It was just fantastic. Maul had his second completely insane scene where he tears apart the hyperdrive and without any lightsaber or any weapon just barrels through clone after clone after clone. And while I feel bad for the clones, Maul's my favorite character, so I'm of course rooting for him. It was great to see more emotion out of Rex. When he's talking about how his brothers don't care about whether or not they kill Ahsoka and Rex, and that they've got to kill them first, you don't really hear the emotion in his voice until Ahsoka removes the helmet, and you see just the tears coming out of his eyes, and it was just so sad. And with the turn of Jesse, I loved how they had a conversation. You can still reason with the clones, because this whole series has been about humanizing the clone troopers. So the fact that they're still themselves, they've just got this chip in their head telling them that the Jedi have betrayed the Republic, makes Order 66 even more sad, because not only did the Jedi lose, but the clone troopers lost as well. The reason that I put the finale below the last 2 episodes is because this episode did feel a little bit anticlimactic to me. And I think that this episode would have benefited from being able to watch all 4 of these episodes at the same time, because as a final battle and as the finale to an arc, it was, like I said, it was beautiful. The action was perfect. It just didn't feel like a good series finale, until the very ending scene with Darth Vader, which made up for all of that. The runner-up, second place on my list, is Episode 11, Shattered. Now, this episode really shattered pretty much everyone's emotions. This episode, Order 66, of course, happened. My 2 favorite scenes from this episode was, number 1, when you hear the clips from Revenge of the Sith mixed with Matt Lanter's voice. When that kicked in, you knew that it was going down. Just seeing the clones turn on Ahsoka like that, even Rex, which was something that we didn't really expect because of Rebels. Everything that happened there was very well done. But my favorite scene of the episode, and my favorite scene of this entire series, of course, we have to talk about the mall hallway scene. So cool. Just so cool. On par with the Darth Vader hallway scene from Rogue One, in my opinion. It was absolutely spectacular, very brutal, which I didn't really expect, but I absolutely love, because Darth Maul has been one of the most violent characters, most dark characters, especially having read that novel about him, which made you feel for the character just as much as Clone Wars has, and being able to see his development from that wordless Sith Lord from Episode 1 all the way to one of the most complex, most emotionally gripping characters of the entire franchise is just very, very cool to see, and that hallway scene was just amazing. The reason that I put it below spot number 1 on the list is because it felt a lot shorter than the other episodes of this arc, and in this final arc especially, I really want it to feel as long as possible. And my very favorite episode of the entire season and the entire series of the Clone Wars is Season 7, Episode 10, The Phantom Apprentice. Now, you could say I'm biased because this was the episode with the most Maul, and Maul is my favorite character, but, I mean, let's be honest, this was Maul's episode. We saw so many sides of him that we haven't really seen before. Like, when he's talking about Sidious, we see scared Maul. When he's talking to Ahsoka, trying to convince him to join her, we see desperate Maul. And then, when they're capturing him, we see truly panicked, frightened Maul. Scared of what's going to happen with Order 66 and the Empire taking over. And I feel like it makes sense that this is the point where he goes to in Rebels. Like, those storylines match up, in my opinion. The part at the beginning with the sewer showed a lot of Sam Witwer's acting ability, able to make everything feel very dramatic and very important, which is something he's very good at, I think. Every time he's giving a speech, I'm on the edge of my seat just waiting for the payoff, and the payoff ended up being at the end of the episode when he gives his second speech, his pitch to Ahsoka for them to join each other. This episode really got me excited for the tie-ins to Revenge of the Sith, because we started first off with Obi-Wan explaining to Ahsoka Anakin killing Count Dooku and him going to Utapau to fight General Grievous. But we can't talk about this episode, of course, without talking about one of my favorite parts of the entire Clone Wars series, which was the final battle between Ahsoka and Darth Maul at the very end. As soon as I saw Darth Maul start to fight, I knew that something was different. It was a much different style than what I had seen in the Clone Wars before, which I'm not trying to bash, but it's certainly not lifelike. And this was very lifelike. And then when I found out that Ray Park, the original Darth Maul, had done the motion capture, that just made it so much cooler to me. And every time I watch that episode, it's just going to be so exciting to know that that is Darth Maul. So there's my ranking, all 12 episodes of Clone Wars Season 7. Let me know what you think. Maybe give me your ranking in the comments below. There were some parts of it that I liked, just some parts that I thought were unnecessary. So, I said that I was going to go over my overall review of the season. Basically, all I'm going to say is that this series has been something very important to a lot of people for 12 years. 6 of those which we have been getting no content for whatsoever, but people have remained loyal, and people have remained excited for the future of the series, and this just could not have gone out on a more perfect note. The story of Ahsoka and Anakin and Obi-Wan throughout their difficult war times, and each of those characters has been so deeply improved and grown as a character to make us care about them so much more. Of course, Ahsoka, who has become the fan favorite Star Wars character. Like, of course, everyone likes Darth Vader, everyone likes Luke Skywalker, everyone likes Han Solo, but Ahsoka has just so quickly become such an iconic and important part of the Star Wars fandom. They were able to end a show on the highest note, and that is something really special. Like I said, the Bad Batch arc was super fun. Not my favorite arc of the entire series, but was very good nonetheless. Trace and Rafa arc was much lower downgrade, and then the Siege of Mandalore arc blew me away. My favorite arc of the entire series by far. I really hope you enjoyed my review. Go drop a like down below if you did. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next video.